All right, let's dive into one of the most remarkable economic stories we've seen in a while. It's about a small island nation whose economy didn't just grow, it absolutely exploded. And the whole thing kicks off with one, honestly unbelievable number.
Get this, 12.6%. That single number is really at the heart of everything we're talking about today. It was Ireland's GDP growth in 2025. And to put it mildly, that is a massive, massive figure. So you have to ask, how in the world did that happen?
And just so we're all on the same page, 12.6% isn't just good, it's a complete global outlier. I mean, you can see it right here. While most other advanced economies were chugging along at maybe 1 or 2%, Ireland was just in a totally different league. This was actually its fastest expansion since that wild, pandemic-fueled boom back in 2021.
So yeah, we're looking at what you can only call a shocking economic boom. Which, of course, leads us to the big question.
Seriously, how is this possible? How does one country manage to just blow past nearly every other advanced economy by such a mind-boggling margin? The answer, it turns out, is pretty unexpected.
The answer isn't buried in some complex financial scheme or anything like that. No, it's actually tied to something you have almost certainly heard about, probably a lot recently.
You know, even the head of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, she pointed to a major clue. She said that the country's exports were doing way, way better than anyone thought they would, surprising everyone on the upside.
And here it is, the big reveal. The engine powering this incredible growth was a global boom in pharma exports. And we're talking specifically about that new generation of super popular weight loss and diabetes drugs. A lot of those are actually made in Ireland and then shipped out, especially to the US. And this boom wasn't just some abstract number. It had huge real-world consequences for the country's bank account. Government tax revenue from company profits, it shot up by over 17%. At the exact same time, the national debt plummeted from 40% of GDP to just under 33%. That's a massive improvement in a single year. Now, what makes this whole story even crazier is that this wasn't happening in some calm, perfect global economy. No, Ireland pulled this off while sailing directly into some pretty serious economic headwinds. The biggest challenge was coming from the United States. You had the U.S. administration actively putting up tariffs on European goods and really pushing for American companies to bring production back home. On paper, that should have been a huge problem for an export-heavy economy like Ireland's. So with that kind of pressure, you'd think foreign companies would start getting nervous, right? Maybe pull back a bit? Well, the exact opposite happened. New foreign investment in Ireland actually leaped by a staggering 38% in 2025. And that 38% jump, that translated into a record 323 new investment projects. So instead of getting scared off by all the global trade drama, companies were actually doubling down on their bet on Ireland. It's just wild. Okay, so that raises a really important question. If the world was getting more hostile to trade, why did Ireland suddenly become more attractive to investors? The answer shows a really fundamental shift in what makes the country's economy tick. For decades, the story about Ireland's economy was simple: low corporate taxes. That was the old playbook. But today, the real appeal has changed. It's not just about taxes anymore. Now it's all about talent and the country's incredibly powerful research ecosystem. And listen, this quote from Matt Kennedy at IDA Ireland, that's the agency that brings in all this investment, he just nails it. He says talent has taken over. And his reasoning is so sharp. Any country can copy a tax rate. That's the easy part. What's way, way harder is trying to replicate the kind of research and talent ecosystem that Ireland has spent decades building. So, after a year that was, frankly, off the charts, is it all smooth sailing from here on out? Well, not necessarily. When we look ahead, the picture gets a lot more complicated. Economists are basically saying, okay, let's all take a deep breath. They're forecasting that growth will slow way down to a more sustainable but, far less spectacular 2.8%. And they're adding a really important warning, an actual contraction where the economy shrinks. They say that can't be ruled out. So you can really see the two paths ahead. The risks are pretty clear: unpredictable U.S. policy, being really dependent on a few giant pharma and tech companies, and just the general threat of more trade chaos.
But the opportunities, they're huge. What if demand for these drugs just keeps going up? And what happens when the big tech companies based in Ireland really start cashing in on AI? And that leaves us with this final, really fascinating question. Is what happens in Ireland a new blueprint for how small, smart economies can win by betting big on talent and research? Or is it a very specific, very high stakes gamble on just a couple of key industries whose future is anything but certain?